The collapse of the Soviet Union was a very important event in history. It meant the end of a big idea called communism for many people. It also ended the Cold War, a long period of tension between the Soviet Union and the United States. After its fall, many new countries were formed in Europe and Asia. Many people today do not know much about this time, but it changed the world. This book will tell the story of how a powerful country disappeared. The Soviet Union began with a big dream. It was a dream of a communist utopia. In this dream, everyone would work together for the common good. People would live with great wealth, peace, and freedom. It sounded like a perfect society, where all people were equal and happy. However, this dream never truly came. Instead, the Soviet Union became a very different place. It was not efficient and had a huge government system that made many things difficult. Under leaders like Joseph Stalin, it turned into a very harsh police state. The government watched everyone. People could be sent to special labor camps even if they had done nothing wrong. Many millions of its own citizens suffered greatly or died during these times. It was a time of fear and control. This book will explore the full story of the Soviet Union's collapse. We will look at the events and problems that led to its end. We will also see how the countries around it changed. Finally, we will understand how this major superpower ended in 1991. It is a story of big changes and a world moving in new ways. 2. An old country's problems. After years of harsh rule, Joseph Stalin died in 1953. New Soviet leaders then made some big changes. They stopped many of the cruel policies that kept people in fear. Many prisoners were freed, and the government reduced its tight control. Life slowly got a little better for many people. They had more freedoms and living standards improved. During World War II, the Soviet Union took control of many countries in Eastern Europe. These countries became satellite states. To keep control, the Soviet Union formed the Warsaw Pact. This was a military agreement with countries like Poland, East Germany, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. It meant they had to support each other in war. It also made sure these countries stayed communist and loyal to the Soviet Union, sometimes using the threat of invasion. After World War II, the Soviet Union and the United States became rivals. This was called the Cold War. The world was split between the capitalist West, led by the US, and the communist East, led by the Soviet Union. A line called the Iron Curtain divided Europe. Both sides spent a lot of money on weapons, trying to be stronger than the other. In the 1950s and 60s, the Soviet economy grew well. But by the 1970s and 80s, things changed. The economy became slow. Leaders did not want new ideas. Some freedoms were taken back. People in countries like Japan, West Germany, and the United States saw their lives get better and better. But in the Soviet Union and its allies, life stayed much the same, as it was in the 60s. People stopped seeing improvements, and the country faced many problems. This time of slow growth and few changes was called stagnation. 3. A new leader's plan. Mikhail Gorbachev became the new leader of the Soviet Union in 1985. He was part of a new generation of leaders. Gorbachev was the first and last Soviet leader born after the revolution. He saw that the country needed big changes. The Soviet Union had a command economy. This meant the government planned everything. It focused on making machines and big projects, but not on things people needed every day, like good food or clothes. This system was very inefficient. If a factory worked badly, the government just gave it more money. This made the economy weaker. Also, the Soviet Union spent a lot of money on weapons to compete with the United States. It also sent money to support other communist countries. These choices meant ordinary people lived worse than people in other developed countries. Gorbachev knew the country was in trouble. He wanted to fix the Soviet system, not end communism. He believed in the first dream of communism, a country where everyone worked for the good of all, with peace and a good life. But he felt the Soviet Union had gone wrong. He wanted to give people more rights, like freedom of speech. He thought if people could criticize the government, it would help it become better. He also wanted local leaders to have more power, not just Moscow. He was a communist, but he wanted a system based on serving the people, not on fear. To make these changes, Gorbachev first replaced many old government leaders with new people who wanted reforms. Then he worked to make relations better with countries around the world. He had three main goals for this. First, he wanted foreign countries to invest money in the Soviet Union. Second, he hoped the Soviet Union could trade more with other nations. Third, and very important, he wanted to improve relations with the United States to end the Cold War. This way, the Soviet Union could stop spending so much money on weapons. Instead, it could use that money to build up the country. Gorbachev announced that the Soviet Union would stop the arms race and take its soldiers out of foreign wars, like the one in Afghanistan. He also said he would reduce Soviet troops in Eastern European countries. These plans showed that a new era was beginning for the Soviet Union. 4. Big changes for the people. Gorbachev introduced a major plan called perestroika, a Russian word for restructuring. Its goal was to make the economy stronger and more competitive, like Western countries. Perestroika included many economic policies from 1985 to 1991. Early changes were small, like seeking foreign money. By 1987, a larger change began. The goal was to change the Soviet command economy into a mixed one, meaning Moscow would not control everything centrally. Under perestroika, people could own parts of businesses. Companies could decide their production based on demand and set their own prices. Businesses had to pay their own costs. The government stopped helping failing ones. Workers could also own their businesses.
The government gave general rules, not detailed production plans. However, large factories and machinery were still owned by the state. This economic change proved very difficult. The Soviet economy was deeply inefficient. The shift made things worse, causing production to decline. Stopping aid to state businesses meant fewer products. This led to big shortages and long lines for basic goods. The government collected less tax but spent more on pensions, creating a huge budget problem, almost bankrupting it. Gorbachev later said the old system collapsed before the new one had time to begin working. Besides economic changes, Gorbachev also started glasnost, meaning openness. This policy gave people many new freedoms. People could travel to other countries, including the West. Books and movies that were banned before were now allowed. The secret police became less powerful. Secret government documents, like details about the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, were shared. People could speak and write more freely, leading to new ideas and groups and intellectual rebirth. Gorbachev hoped glasnost would make communism better, but Soviet people were tired of being lied to.
With new freedoms and worsening economic shortages, they did not want to fix communism. Instead, they criticized the government and the entire communist system openly. They started thinking about leaving communism completely. This new openness, combined with economic problems, began to change people's minds about their country's future. 5. The wall comes down. The Soviet Union made a very important decision. It chose not to use its army to stop changes in Eastern European countries. This was different from past times, like in 1953 in East Germany, 1956 in Hungary, or 1968 in Czechoslovakia, when Soviet troops stopped protests. This new approach surprised many and made people hopeful for change. In 1988, protests for workers' rights began in Poland. These protests led to talks with the government. Soon, Poland held free elections. Non-communist parties were allowed to join. In August 1989, a non-communist party won, and Poland had its first non-communist government since World War II. The Soviet Union did nothing to stop it. Hungary also saw big changes. On March 15, 1989, many protested. The government then agreed to hold free elections. These elections took place in March 1990. Like Poland, Hungary moved away from communism without Soviet intervention. During this time, Hungary did something else very important. It opened its border with Austria. For decades, the Iron Curtain divided Europe with walls and fences. But now there was a hole. People from the communist East could travel to the capitalist West. Many East Germans saw this chance. They traveled through Hungary to Austria and then to West Germany. The government of East Germany became worried. They closed their borders with other communist countries. This caused many protests across East Germany. People wanted to travel freely. The East German government hoped Soviet troops would come to help them, but they never did.
Then, on November 9, 1989, a government spokesperson made a mistake on TV. He announced that people could cross the border immediately. Thousands of East Germans went to the Berlin Wall checkpoints. The border guards were confused, but with no orders to stop them, they opened the gates. People climbed onto the wall, celebrating.
Many Germans took hammers and chisels to break parts of the wall themselves. This was a huge moment. Soon after, East and West Germany began the process of becoming one country again. Free elections were held in January 1990, and Germany became united in October of that year. The revolutions quickly spread. In Czechoslovakia, students protested on November 17, 1989. More and more people joined. Within days, the communist leaders resigned. By November 28, the government said it would hold free elections and remove border fences. This was called the Velvet Revolution because it was mostly peaceful. Bulgaria's leaders saw what was happening. They removed their own leader soon after the Berlin Wall fell. They allowed more freedom of speech. This led to more protests and calls for free elections, which were held in June 1990. Romania had the bloodiest revolution. Its leader, Nicolae Ceausescu, did not want to give up power. Protests began on December 16, 1989. Ceausescu held a big rally, but the crowd turned against him. The army switched sides. Ceausescu and his wife were captured, put on trial, and executed on Christmas Day, December 25, 1989. Over 1,000 people died in Romania's revolution. By the start of 1900, all Eastern European countries that were part of the Warsaw Pact had seen big political changes. The Soviet Union's decision not to intervene allowed these countries to choose their own path, ending communist rule in this region. 6. Trouble inside the country. The Soviet Union made a big change. For the first time, it allowed people to vote in elections with many different political parties. Before, people could only vote for the Communist Party. This new freedom was meant to make the government better and more open. However, many people who were unhappy with the communist system voted for groups that wanted their regions to become independent from Moscow. Lithuania was one of the first republics to act. A new political movement won most of the votes in their local parliament. Soon after, Lithuania declared itself an independent country, separate from the Soviet Union. Moscow did not send its army to stop Lithuania. Instead, the Soviet Union used an economic embargo, meaning they stopped trade and supplies to Lithuania. This showed other republics that they might also be able to leave without a direct military attack. This lack of strong military action from Moscow encouraged more independence movements. Other parts of the Soviet Union also began to move towards independence. In local elections, Armenia, Estonia, Georgia, Latvia, and Moldova voted out their old communist leaders, choosing parties that sought more control or full independence.
Georgia officially declared its independence on April 9, 1991. Ukraine saw large, peaceful protests and began taking steps to control its own economy and military, clearly stating its goal to become fully independent. Protests and unrest spread across the large country. In Azerbaijan, people protested strongly, destroying border fences. Here, the Soviet army did use force against protesters, which further alienated local people from the central government. In Tajikistan, protests became violent, with people burning government buildings and demanding political and economic reforms. In Kyrgyzstan, different ethnic groups fought each other over land, leading to hundreds of deaths. To try and stop the country from breaking apart, Soviet leaders led by Mikhail Gorbachev proposed new solutions. They launched a 500 days program which aimed to quickly transform the economy into a market-based system. They also planned a new union treaty to create a freer group of states, where each region would have more power and equal rights within a renewed federation. On March 17, 1991, a nationwide referendum was held. Over 75% of people who voted wanted to keep a renewed union. However, some regions also held their own votes on independence on the same day. In Russia, people voted to have their own president. Boris Yeltsin then became the first president of Russia in June 1991. Even with these plans and the referendum results, the desire for full independence grew stronger in many republics. The trouble inside the country was getting bigger, and the central government's power was slipping away. 7. The last fight for the Union. Mikhail Gorbachev still hoped to save the Soviet Union. He planned a new kind of country, a freer federation. This meant each republic would have more power and rights. Every person, no matter their background, would also have equal rights.
He wanted to change the Soviet Union from a central power to one where local leaders could solve local problems. This new agreement, called the New Union Treaty, aimed to keep the country together by giving its parts more freedom. To see if people liked this idea, the government held a vote, a referendum, on March 17, 1991. People were asked if they wanted to keep the Soviet Union as a renewed federation of equal republics. Almost 150 million people voted, and over 75% said yes. They wanted a new, freer union. In June 1991, Boris Yeltsin was chosen as the first president of Russia, showing the growing power of individual republics. The new Union Treaty was set to be signed on August 20. However, not everyone liked these changes. Some powerful leaders, known as hardliners, wanted the old Soviet Union back. They included the defense minister, the vice president, and the head of the secret police. They believed Gorbachev's plans made the country weak. So, in August 1991, they tried to take control in a sudden attack, a coup. Gorbachev was on holiday and put under house arrest.
The hardliners stopped free newspapers and sent the army to take over government buildings in Moscow. The coup leaders thought people would support them. They expected to be seen as heroes, but they were wrong. Thousands of ordinary people came out into the streets to stop the coup. When tanks moved towards the Russian parliament building, people bravely stood in front of them, forming a human wall. They did not want the army to take over. Boris Yeltsin, the newly elected Russian president, played a very important part. He climbed onto a tank outside the parliament and told the crowd the coup was wrong, calling for resistance. The people's courage and Yeltsin's leadership worked. After only 2 days, on August 21, the coup failed. The hardliners' plan to bring back the old Soviet Union did not work. This event was a turning point. It showed that the central government in Moscow had lost its power and the trust of its people. The coup destroyed any hope of keeping the Soviet Union together. From this moment, many more republics quickly decided to leave and become independent countries, like dominoes falling one after another. End of a superpower. After the failed coup, many people across the Soviet Union felt that Moscow could no longer govern them. Trust in the central government was broken. This led to a wave of independence declarations.
One by one, different republics decided to leave the Union. First, Estonia declared its freedom. Then Latvia followed just 1 day later. Ukraine announced its independence on August 24th, and Belarus on the 25th. Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan also soon left the Soviet control. Later, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Russia, and Kazakhstan followed. Each declaration was like a piece falling off a big building. There was almost nothing left of the once powerful Soviet Union. Finally, with all its parts gone, the Soviet Union could not continue. It was officially dissolved on December 26, 1991. The superpower, which had existed for 69 years, was no more. There were no big parades or loud celebrations. Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the last leader of the Soviet Union, gave a final speech. He shared his sadness about the end of the Union, but also spoke of hope for a better and freer future for the people. After his speech, Gorbachev resigned from his post. Many people felt he had completed his mission. He had removed the very strict control of the old system, even if new challenges would come for the new countries. The collapse of the Soviet Union was a huge event. It marked the end of the Cold War and created many new independent countries in Europe and Asia. This was truly the end of an important era in history. What do you think was the biggest change for the world after the Soviet Union ended?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.